Hey, it's Antoinette Latouf, and today I have an exclusive chat with two students from the University of Melbourne just hours before they face a disciplinary hearing for their involvement in an encampment and protesting in a building which they renamed Mahmoud's Hall. One is a medical student who is nearing the end of his studies. Another is a Jewish student who say that they have been unfairly surveilled and targeted and intimidated. Thanks so much for joining the briefing, Karim and Zara. Karim, I'll start with you. You're a medical student nearing the end of your studies, and you potentially face being kicked out for protesting the murder of children and civilians. How does that sit with you, given you're entering, I suppose, the business of saving lives?
I think it's absurd that this is a possibility. It would be a shame for a system that desperately requires doctors and people that care about humanity to lose a potential doctor. I'm very confident that we were doing the right thing and that we were protesting a very just cause, protesting for, as you said, human lives, the lives of men, women and children, of the elderly, of my fellow healthcare professionals that are being targeted in this genocide.
And Zara, tell me a little bit about yourself and the role you played in the encampment.
I was just one of many participants in the sit-in and the encampment. I was inspired to be more active in the movement from Dana, a Palestinian woman at the university, leading a die-in a couple months ago at the university in which she got us to sit down and read out the names of the Palestinian children who hadn't made it to their first birthday since October 7th. And just reading out the names of the 0-year-olds took a very, very long time. Dana really, I think she brought in a lot of people by getting us to face the realities of what's happening in Gaza. So I've just been doing whatever I can to show solidarity and support as a Jewish woman and just as a student at the university.
You both took in what was called the Mahmoud's Hall sit-in. And, there was some criticism that by taking over a building, that it's disruptive to classes, it's intimidating to other students. What's your response to those criticisms?
Well, I think that it certainly wasn't an intimidating space. We had libraries set up and we had children coming in to participate with us, young primary school children. We had my grandmother visiting. I think it was a very welcoming participatory space for any students and just community members who wanted to engage with us or come into the space. It was a very safe, encouraging, welcoming community space. But I wouldn't shy away from saying that it was disruptive. And I think that during an act of genocide, I think that it's warranted, especially when the university has been so non-receptive to hearing its students and staff's demands of our involvement and complicity in the genocide, that, I think potentially the space could have been a little disruptive, but certainly not intimidating, certainly not unsafe.
I completely agree. It was a very beautiful, welcoming, inclusive space on campus. Probably the most. However, as you said, I don't want to infantilize the movement. It was still very much an activist space. And protests are not meant to be inconspicuous. We need to make noise.
In making that noise, in making the university uncomfortable, there were also reports that Jewish students felt unsafe. Zara, I'm going to ask you your opinion on that and what you witnessed regarding that. When there is a sit-in or an encampment which is calling on the university to disclose ties to the IDF or Israel or weapons companies, if you're not also at the same time calling for the release of hostages or voicing concern for Israeli suffering, does that, whether intended or not, impact how some Jewish students feel?
I think that could definitely impact how some Jewish students feel. And I think that is amplified a lot by media presence that plays on the fears of Jewish students. But there's a difference between feeling uncomfortable and actually being unsafe. And I think that any of those Jewish students, and there were quite a lot of them, that took the time to actually enter our spaces and come to the camp and come to the hall, immediately were confronted with the fact that a lot of that representation is a lie. Because in the space we had big banners for Jewish students for Palestine. We held Shabbat at the camp and in the hall. I stayed there the whole time and I was very comfortable. And even some of the students who I think were supposedly uncomfortable, Zionist students, they were coming very often to engage with us and clearly felt comfortable and safe to enter the space. They had no fear of us. I think that it is possible that some people felt uncomfortable, and I don't think that should be a priority in the space at the moment while people are dying.
So the encampment ended about a month ago, and there was an agreement reached about disclosure with the university. What was that agreement, and did that feel like a win?
So this agreement came about after many months of negotiation. So these negotiations were taking part with university officials in the Chancellery well before the encampment and the sit-in commenced. The university's reluctance to accept any of the demands that we had prior to these, as I like to call them, more disruptive protests, is what necessitated that level of protest. And what we were calling for and what was in the end agreed upon by the university is to disclose the nature of the funding and the partnerships with these weapons manufacturers. So, for example, several of the largest weapons manufacturers in the world, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, BAE Systems, Rosebank Engineering, all of these companies have, I'll say, quite intimate ties with the university, and they provide funding for research. And the nature of that research was confidential. And so what this disclosure achieved was finding out what those research outputs are. Where is this money going? And what is it going towards?
I think there's a big caveat to be had as well. I think disclosure was an amazing win, and it's very important to get concrete figures about the ties between our university and the Australian military and the American military and all of these very, very problematic, violent companies. But as the university themselves pointed out, due to national interests and various privacy laws, a lot of that information is still being withheld. And I think it's safe to assume that a lot of the projects that are still being kept secret and not disclosed are some of the most problematic things that the university is involved in.
So have you received any of that information yet?
We have received some disclosure. The university's published a page which lists millions of dollars of ties to these companies.
As well as the US Department of Defense.
Yeah, but it's not a comprehensive list.
Yes, and a lot of critical information is omitted, including timeframes of these partnerships and the contracts, and it's not anywhere near the level of detail that we thought that we were agreeing to in these negotiations, which is disappointing.
So then around 20 students, including the two of you, received emails from the university, which also captured images of you in Mahmoud's hall. What was that like, receiving that and being told, we see you, and now you need to front a hearing about your future with the university?
I personally found it very surprising and in very poor taste of the university to release it, especially when and how they did. I think the evidence brought against us is very, frankly, creepy, and it made me really uncomfortable to know that the university is either employing people to comb footage for my face and trying to watch my life while I'm sitting in this building, or they are weaponizing the AI technology that they've developed with weapons companies. But either option feels very uncomfortable as a student. The whole atmosphere of the political trials and these sanctions feel like the university is setting themselves in opposition against us and kind of isolating us as their own students. And I found it very uncomfortable.
Karim, what about you? And what are you told the possible outcomes could be as a result of these hearings?
The outcomes are numerous. They range from as simple as a warning or a caution to a fine, to being banned from certain areas on campus or using certain services like the library, all the way to enrollment consequences such as expulsion or suspension, which would be devastating for me personally, but for all of us really. But yeah, as I said earlier, I feel that I acted in a way that is in accordance with the university's own values, in accordance with the values that the medical school constantly espouses, values of empathy, values of human rights, values of standing your ground for what you believe in. I think it's disappointing that this academic institution, who initially wrote that this sit-in came to a peaceful end through negotiation, and ended up wanting to discipline us in this way, or at least frighten us in this way, or threaten us. This is meant to be an institution. If we strip back the layers of national interest, this is historically, universities are meant to be institutions for high thinking, cultivating critical thought.
I will push back on that as well, because historically, you go into this knowing that encampments and student protests at universities, while some being effective, at times they have resulted in severe punishment, in some cases in the 60s with the Vietnam War, leading to imprisonment. So did you go into this eyes wide open?
We knew the consequences. We knew the risks going into protesting like this. However, we were very firm in maintaining a peaceful nature to these protests. Yes, as we discussed earlier, these protests may have been seen as disruptive, and we're meant to disrupt. That's how, like we said, that's how we get the university's attention. However, I don't think that level of disruption compares to the disruption of, say, my fellow medical students in Gaza.
Zara, you're hours away from fronting the disciplinary hearing. Talk me through how you're feeling. Like, how is your body, your gut, your breathing? How's this impacting you walking into that room?
Honestly, very anxious. I feel a pit in my stomach, and I think that's shared by all the students going into this. It's a very difficult set of proceedings to go through, and it feels very punitive from the university regardless of the outcome. It's been a very difficult thing to put on us at this time when we're already dealing with quite a lot. But I think that's juxtaposed a lot as well by the feeling of just the frivolity of these allegations brought against us. The consequences may be very serious, and it feels horrible, to be honest, but it's leveled as well with the fact that the university is trying to punish us for entering buildings on campus, being in them, studying in them, protesting peacefully in them. The evidence they've brought against us is photos of us standing and using Wi-Fi. So it feels very difficult, but also just very silly for the university to have done this.
The Office of the Victorian Information Commissioner is now investigating if your privacy and your fellow students' privacy was breached. Is that of any comfort to you?
Yes, I wouldn't use the word comforting, but I do think it's necessary. I think it's relieving that this state agency, this external body that we didn't even reach out to, has taken it upon themselves to investigate this, because I do believe it is quite a serious violation, and it has shaken us all up. I would say it's been very disturbing, to feel surveilled to this extent in this way. So yeah, it definitely needs to be looked into incredibly seriously.
Thank you so much for your time, Zara and Karim, and all the best with your disciplinary hearings. Be in touch and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that is it for this episode. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe and keep up to date with everything we do here at The Briefing. But also leave a comment below and let us know what you thought of this chat. I'm Sasha Barbagat. Catch you next time.